Good morning, Muttonistas, and I do mean morning. It's quite early, before 8 o'clock, and I am at Hemel Hempstead Station. What are you doing there, Mutton, you might ask? Well, very interesting day today. I'm going to be checking out two products today. More than two, but two distinct things. I'm going to be checking out Meyba Football shirts, a company that used to provide Barcelona, no less, with their football shirts. They've made a bit of a comeback now, and I'm going to check out what they have to offer. I'm also going to check out the beers at the Mad Squirrel Brewery. Not a brewery or beers that I've come across before because they're really focused on the southeast of England and mainly the home counties, but I've heard good things about them, Muttonistas, especially from you all, and I'm really looking forward to a certain nitro stout that they produce. So join me for today's vlog about football shirts, a beer canning factory and a brewery taproom. Right, Muttonistas, I am now in the district of Potton End, a little village at the edge of Hemel Hempstead, and behind me, big brewery facilities, vans to ship the beer out. I'm not sure what's in store for me today, but I'm looking forward to it, looking forward to trying one of the football shirts, but most importantly, the beer. Okay, Muttonistas, lovely day today, and before we go and see the canning process, I'm going to show you something rather unusual. The Mad Squirrel Brewery has a fleet of vans. It's a bigger operation than I thought it would be, and they have a different van for every different type of beer they produce. And I think I've been led to believe that Sumo is their biggest seller. Well, obviously, because there's a second van there to deliver Sumo. Okay, Muttonistas, we are now at the brewing area, the technical bit of the tour, and I'm going to meet Matthias, the head brewer, who's going to explain some of their brews, what hops they use, and how they can the beer.
Okay, so we are here at the brew house now. That's where the malt is coming in from the malt room that I just showed you. Gets mixed with water, comes in here, and this is our mash tun, or better said, mash conversion vessel. And it gets stirred and mixed and then pumped over into our lauter tun, and that's actually what's happening right now. So we have the mash, that's what it's called, in there, and we're sparging water over the grain bed and washing out all these sugars that we need later for the fermentation. We're going to wash them out of the grain bed and collect them over there into the kettle. And here in the kettle, all the water gets collected. So that's essentially a nice, sweet, sugary liquid. And in there we boil it and then add the hops. So today we're doing Big C, which has Centennial in it, Chinook, Citra, and Simcoe. And after the boil, it goes down there in this interesting looking box, which is a heat exchanger. And from there, we cool the hot water down, and the hot water, the cold water that's now hot, goes into the hot liquor tank, which is this nice big vessel over there, and the cold water goes into one of our big fermentation vessels.
Now, Muttonistas, this is a first for me, being able to see how beer is put into a can. Obviously, we all drink beer from cans, but none of us actually know anything about the process of actually canning it. Okay, Muttonistas, at the moment, as you can see, they are canning post-match Mosaic Pale Ale, 3.4%. Glad it's that weak because it's only 9:30 in the morning and I'm only going to have a little taste. But it is fresh from the tank, as fresh as you can get. Yeah, it's obviously a keg ale because it is a little bit effervescent, but it's got hoppy flavours, fairly light, and it's not going to get you too drunk, this. Anyway, Muttonistas, if you're interested in the quantities involved here, that's a limited release beer, and they're canning 1,500 of those today. Now, for one of their more regular beers, say Sumo, which is their biggest seller, 70,000 they do every 2.5 weeks.
Right, so now we're testing the oxygen in the can, so we ensure that the beer stays fresh. So we're gonna shake this for a couple of seconds, and then if you film here now, you can actually see what happens. So we're gonna send the beer through our DO meter, dissolved oxygen meter. So you can film the display here. Let's see what the result is going to be.
And you'll have to tell me what these results actually mean because I don't fully understand them myself.
The 4.25, that's the CO2 content in the beer, and the 84 ppb, parts per billion, that's the oxygen content in the beer. So the dissolved oxygen. Results of the other beers, of the other filling heads. And now we know that the oxygen in the beer is actually okay, so it stays fresh, which is obviously very important. Oxygen is the enemy. So for that piece of equipment, you can buy a car. So it's about 25 grand.
Oh, you can buy a pretty good one.
Yeah.
And what are the small bottles used for here?
So these are just used. So here we have actually fresh ones. So these are sterilized bottles, and we're going to use them to sample for microbiological tests.
Okay.
So because obviously they need to be sterile for us to not introduce a microorganism that we don't want to have in there. So we test that the beer is microbiologically okay.
So here we are in the cold room. I'm not sure what temperature it is, but it feels like it's around 10 degrees Celsius. And as you can see, lots of boxes of canned beer, casks and kegs as well. So don't worry, for those of you who are cask purists, the Mad Squirrel Brewery does produce casks, but the majority of the operation is keg. And I have to say, this is really heavy lifting, I can imagine. Oh, maybe not. A keg does contain 88 pints, so I suspect I would struggle to do that two-handed, let alone one-handed. Okay, Muttonistas, I've just been informed that that was a 52-pint keg, not an 88-pint keg. Otherwise, I think I've just talked to the world's strongest man if he can do an 88 with one hand. And in case you're wondering what the shelf life or cellar life is of these kegs and casks, the kegs you can use for up to 3 months. The casks, however, once they're vented, have to be drunk within 5 days. And it makes sense for pubs, if they're not having that many people drinking, to use kegs rather than casks. But you know, with me, Muttonistas, the cask's always king. Okay, Muttonistas. Now, I did mention that sports or football shirts are a part of this video because the collaboration is between Meyba Football shirts and the Mad Squirrel Brewery. Now, you might see behind me, to your surprise maybe, Barcelona shirts. And did you know, Muttonistas, that the Meyba company did used to produce Barcelona shirts? So some retro shirts here on the back, orange and yellow, the iconic yellow shirt, and their own Mad Squirrel Meyba collaborative shirt. Nice one to go out and play football in down the park. And if you stick around on the video, Muttonistas, you might well see one with Mutton written on it. So obviously everything changes in terms of business, and the Meyba company has moved on. And at the moment they supply 5 teams in Spain, 2 in the US, and are negotiating with 15 to 20 teams in England. And any successfully negotiated shirts you'll see in the 25-26 season. Okay, Muttonistas, the Mutton shirt. It's the Mad Squirrel and Meyba shirt, as you can see from the logos on the front. Thankfully, 3XL, Mutton size. And keep an eye out on my Instagram posts because I am going to raffle off one of these shirts and a crate of beer from the Mad Squirrel Brewery. Okay, Muttonistas, now the bit you've been waiting for. I'm in the tap room and the tasting. As always, when I visit breweries, I'm just going to have a little bit of each beer and have a pint or two, or maybe a pint and a half of the two I like the most, depending on their strength. It is still only 10:30 in the morning. That's why I'm only going to have a tiny amount of each beer to taste. You wouldn't want me to be sloshed by lunchtime, would you now? And incidentally, Muttonistas, if you want to come here to the tap room, on Fridays they open from 2:30 until 7, and at weekends, I think Saturday and Sunday, 12 till 7. Do check the website in case that changes, but I've just heard it from the manager, i.e. the horse's mouth. Get the pressure out of the keg. Yeah, so does that. Right. Then you open it. And then beer comes through. Okay, little interlude there about kegging. Again, something I've not seen before. Hope you enjoyed that. Back to the tap room for the tasting. And as always, I'm going to start from weak to strong, only having like a sixth because I don't want to be smashed, and I want to try a pint or two or a pint and a half of the two that I decide are most to my taste. Anyway, the lines get cleaned on a Friday morning, which is great. Straight from the barrel in the tap room, it's as fresh as you can get. This is, by the way, Muttonistas, why coming to tap rooms to drink is usually quite a good idea. Okay, we're starting with Hopfest, a gluten-free pale ale, 3.8%, the weakest in the range other than the post-match ale that came in cans. The hops used here, Citra, Centennial, Amarillo, so I should enjoy a lot of the flavours here, although whether I'll enjoy those flavours in such a weak beer, I don't know. Only one way to find out. That's very nice, cool, refreshing, quite citrusy, although, as I said, I must admit, I do prefer that style of beer a little stronger, but there will be some of you out there who prefer the weaker beers, and this would be a good session choice. And as I said earlier, if you have gluten issues, that's a beer for you. It's gluten-free. Right, Muttonistas, round 2. Zealous Pilsner Lager, 4.4%, lagered for 65 days in a tank. I'm not that big on lager, but you've seen me in places like Germany and Central Europe enjoying them, so no reason why I shouldn't enjoy this, given the master brewer is German here. Yeah, that's quite pleasant. Okay, lager's not my thing, but for a lager, it's very, very drinkable. It's quite clean and crisp, and it's not overly fizzy, which is a big deal for me. Okay, Muttonistas, on to number 3. Beer number 3, Pin Drop Tropical IPA, coming in at 4.5% ABV. And interestingly, this is a beer that has been brewed in collaboration with a women's nightlife safety app called Where You're At. The hops here, Citra and Mosaic, so it'll be interesting to see how they've managed to extract tropical fruit flavours from those hops. Yeah, just with those hops, I wouldn't expect it to be a fruit bomb, but the flavours are subtle. There is a fair amount of fruit there, but very, very subtly crafted. Right, Muttonistas, now on to the first of the stouts. Now, this is the keg stout without nitrogen, just a normal keg stout, and it's called De La Nut. They have a range here at the Mad Squirrel Brewery of De La Stout. So they have De La Creme, which is the one they produce the most often, and De La Maple, which they produced on Pancake Day. Now, I'm a bit wary of this because it might be a bit sweet for me, but we will see how it goes. Yeah, you're getting a lot of nutty flavours, but that one's a little bit sweet for me. Also with stouts, I'm big on nitro. Keg stouts are not actually my favourite, especially when they're a little bit effervescent. But again, some people like that style. Talking of stout, now on to the stout that I've been really interested in trying here, the Shamrock Nitro Stout. And it does actually have its own glassware, this pint does, and I'm just letting it settle before I drink it, otherwise the Guinness police would slaughter me. Yes, and Shamrock comes in at 4.5%. You can see the head, this is going to be a lot smoother and creamier. Oh yeah, that's on the money. It's hard to see this not being one of the two beers which I try in a larger size at the end. That's good. Not bitter at all. Very, very slight hint of lactose, but not so much. So the usual chocolate and coffee notes with a slight emphasis on coffee. Again, the notes are very subtle. So don't worry, you're not going to get overwhelmed by these flavours. Lovely drop, this one. And I have to say, when you see an independent nitro stout, it is usually worth a try. Obviously, they keep it very well here, but they tend to be easier to keep. Guinness is a very, very complicated beer to keep. A lot of people go for it just for the name and end up having, in my opinion, what are very sour and disappointing pints. Muttonistas, now we are going to try the Sumo American Pale Ale at 4.7%. It's the flagship beer of the brewery. It's often seen in supermarkets, particularly in the home counties area, along with bars and pubs. And I understand that they can ship it nationwide if you want to buy cans of it. More on that later. Let's get on with the tasting, less waffle. Hops involved here, Summit and Mosaic, and the notes talk about tropical fruit, but again, it's very, very restrained. But what I did like about that beer was the long, dry finish. And of course, the reason why the beer is named Sumo is because of the names of the hops, Summit and Mosaic. Next, Muttonistas, Big C West Coast or Pacific IPA. I think I'm going to like this. It comes in at 5.5% ABV, and I'm hoping, because the hops involved are Citra, Chinook and Simcoe, sometimes West Coast IPAs do actually use Amarillo hops as well, but all these West Coast beers can be brewed with different varieties to produce different flavours. I'm hoping for some citrus, some tropical fruit, and a good, strong, hoppy finish. Yeah, I got all of those, but again, very interesting. Most of the beers at this brewery, the secondary flavours are very subtle and restrained. For some people, they like a hop bomb. Some people, they like it more subtle like this. I think this is very nice, and in terms of the 2 pints that I'm going to have at the end, or a pint and a half, it'll be something special that knocks this and the Nitro Stout off its perch. Muttonistas, something a little interesting and unusual now. It's called Aztec IPA, and it's a mountain IPA, which is a cross between West Coast and New England. It was a limited release beer, and it's been stocked from time to time by Sainsbury's, of all people, I believe. And again, for this one, because of the West Coast notes, I'm expecting a hoppy finish, but I'm expecting something a bit fruitier as well. The only hop used is Idaho 7, so single hopped beers or pale ales are quite unusual. So I'm hoping the master brewer has brewed something pretty special here, because they are very difficult to make, in my opinion. But anyway, that one comes in at 6.2% Aztec Mountain IPA, and it's about the right strength for that style of beer, in my opinion. I think the West Coast style pale ales are better when they're around 5.5 to 6.5%. And talking of New England IPAs, Muttonistas, the next beer is called Roadkill, coming in at 6.5%. This is described as a New England IPA, and there's all sorts going on here hop-wise. We have Citra, Mosaic, Amarillo, the Holy Trinity, Idaho 7, which we had in that single hopped Aztec beer, and El Dorado, a hop I'm not actually familiar with. Yeah, that is what I expect from a New England IPA. A lot of pronounced fruit flavours, some of which are quite tropical. I do prefer the West Coast ones, but this is a good example, because again, you get the right amount of hoppiness and the right amount of bitterness at the finish. And finally, Muttonistas coming in at 7.4%, Fog Off New England Double IPA. Double IPAs have become quite trendy in recent years, but they are so strong, I would really recommend having them in halves or 2/3. The hops involved here, Galaxy, Citra and Strata. Strata I'm not familiar with, but there are loads of hops out there, a lot of them quite experimental, and it's amazing the flavours you can produce when they're combined in the right quantities. And in the tasting notes, London Fog yeast is added. Let's see how this one goes. Actually, that is really good. That is really, really good. Again, subtle, restrained, tropical fruit flavours, but wow, what a hoppy finish. What a hop bomb. Ooh, I'm going to have to sit down and think about that. So there we are, Muttonistas, quite a range, and I'll be back with you when I've selected which 2 beers I'm going to have in a larger quantity to wrap the video up. But what I will say, because a lot of you, when I recently posted a 4% bitter, say, oh, it's not a beer, it's only 4%. I'm afraid, if you'll excuse my French, that is utter bollocks. Good beers can be produced at all sorts of strength, from 3.5% way up to even 12%, if you've ever been to a Belgian bar and you're finishing off a rather heavy evening. They all have their distinct characteristics, and they can taste pretty good. I would say a very weak lager, no, I wouldn't like that, but when it comes to ales, stouts, the strength is not the most important thing. And if you think about it, the world's best-selling beer, or Britain's best-selling beer, which is Guinness, is only 4.1% ABV. My favourite, London Black, 4.4. And this stout here, the Shamrock, comes in at 4.5 and is a rather tasty drop, if I may say so. So don't listen to people, shall we call them the ABV police? And just as a footnote, Muttonistas, that beer came as part of a series. Two now sold out ales, Fog Light at 5.2% and Foggy at 6%. But I really like that one, and Muttonistas, maybe I've been fortunate in the timing of my visit, because that double IPA I've decided is going to be one of my finishing beverages. Right, Muttonistas, having tried the whole range, time for something to eat. I'm a little hungry. And it has become popular for brewery tap rooms or bars associated with breweries to have food offerings. And here at the Mad Squirrel Brewery, they offer handmade pizzas, and they look rather nice, if I may say so. As always, I've not messed about. I've just gone for a plain margarita. I don't like to overload my pizzas with tons of things. Others with me have gone for pepperoni and chicken. But here's my plain margarita, cheese and tomato. And to be honest, when it comes to making pizza, it's a fair test of the pizza maker's mettle as to how well they can do a margarita. And it's looking promising already because it's thin crust. I cannot stand those American deep crust, triple filled deep pan pizzas where you feel as if you've eaten 2 loaves of bread in one sitting. Yeah, that's good. Good tomato sauce, decent mozzarella, thin crust, Robert's your uncle. And yes, to round the video off, Muttonistas, I'm going for the 2 beers that I enjoyed the most. First of all, the Fog Off Double IPA, 7.2%. That's why I'm only having a half of it. It's still only lunchtime. I don't want to be on the floor because I've got other places I have to go to later in the day. But as I detected from my tiny taste earlier on, it's got those upfront fruit flavours, tropical fruit flavours, typical of a New England IPA, but still not overly sweet. Obviously it's hazy, which New England IPAs often are, but it has a deliciously hoppy finish, which sometimes only double IPAs can deliver. So if you like a stronger beer, I think this is a good choice. Anyway, I'll finish this and we'll have the final pint before we close the video off. And finally, Muttonistas, yes, you guessed it, the other preferred pint here is the Shamrock Nitro Stout, 4.5% ABV. Now, I only had a little sip of it for my initial taste, and I think in the form of a pint, I'm going to get the full creaminess, the full smooth texture of this fairly dry stout. It's not far off the dryness of a Guinness, I have to say. Very smooth, restrained notes, very similar to Guinness, but kept better, probably easier to keep, and I have to say, unless you're in a top Guinness pub in Britain, this is a better bet for sure. Anyway, I'll finish off this delicious pint, Muttonistas, and I'll be back with you at the end of the pint to wrap the video up. Well, Muttonistas, all good things have to come to an end. Coming to the end of my pint of Shamrock, and it has stayed smooth to the bottom of the glass. Great range of beers I've tried here. Lovely football shirt that I've been given by Meyba, and I will be running a competition, and you'll have to check my Instagram feed for this, for a free shirt from Meyba and some beer from the Mad Squirrel Brewery. But as always, I'm going to have to love you and leave you, Muttonistas. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please remember to keep liking these videos and push me up the algorithm. Share with your friends, subscribe and hit the bell button, and you'll know exactly when my next video comes out. But until then, the most important thing, folks, is don't forget, you can't beat a bit of mutton.